So welcome, episode 2 of Bullhorns and Sirens. Welcome, Sam.
Hi.
On the spot there.
I was literally just about to take a sip of tea. Hi.
And me, Tommy. You forgot my name, didn't you?
No, I knew your name.
So,
No, it's
who
good.
is he?
Well, just
Why
like
is
me.
why is he back?
I'm
Just
just
let
coming
me-
along for the party.
I heard after the first one, the record number of complaints.
Yeah, that's it. To Ofcom.
So what?
We've reached 40,000 Ofcom complaints from the first episode. Yeah. What we're going to be talking about today is it's called Fail to Prepare, Prepare to Fail, isn't it?
That's episode 2. That's our title.
And so we're going to be talking about preparing for the OSCE and also for placements, and then we're going to dive into a little bit about OSCEs and placements.
So in the last episode we used two different terms. We said OSCE and OSPE.
Yes.
I think they're effectively the same thing, just with a different name, aren't they? So OSCE, I think, stands for Observed Structural Clinical Examination.
Yeah.
And then OSPE is Observed Structural Practical Examination.
Yeah.
Same thing, slightly different terminology, no difference.
Different unis probably.
Yeah,
call
so
them
different
OSCEs
unis,
or
different
OSCEs.
services. Yeah.
What was your most nerve-wracking OSCE, James?
So I had to resit a musculoskeletal OSCE. So the first one I thought went okay, and as it turns out went disastrously. So having to resit, there was that added pressure of, if I don't pass, I might be off the course here. That was definitely most.
Jeez.
So how many attempts did you get?
2.
Did you get the option to appeal for a third? Or was it 2 and out?
No, I passed.
No, I mean, but if you had a failed second
Oh.
time, would you have had 3...
I don't know. There was definitely the threat of, thank you very much, but you're off. But I wonder if there had been that little bit more.
So we had 3 attempts at every OSCE, whatever. We had 3 attempts at them, but I think the third one was like on appeal of like the failure of second attempt.
Right. Okay.
But you could always appeal. I don't think anyone. I think it would like have to be extreme circumstances for them to say no to your third attempt.
Right.
Fair enough. Yeah. I seem to do alright on OSCEs, to be honest. I'm a magician also by background, for those that don't know. And so I'm used to like performing, sort of being in front of like a pressured environment. So OSCEs don't really bother me too much, but I completely understand the nervousness behind the whole pressure of it and being assessed.
So I enjoyed OSCEs. I quite like them because I think I preferred that to the written exams and the essays because I if I can relate to what the job is, like as in how the education links to the job, which you can with the practical stuff, then I found it easier to learn from. I mean, don't get me wrong, even though I enjoyed OSCEs, I still was super nervous going, like, realistically, I probably should have been sitting my OSCEs on a commode. Because that definitely would have suited my bowels better. Like, I think we all agree that you definitely get nervous poos on OSCE days.
Nervous wheeze, definitely nervous.
No,
wheeze.
really?
Nervous
Oh,
wheeze,
no,
yeah.
mine...
Fair enough.
Okay, well, clearly
Just you, Sam.
just me, yeah, awkward.
So there was a guy on my tech course that, I'm not going to name drop him, that'd be awful, wouldn't it? This is going to be so embarrassing for him. And yeah, he was in and out of the toilet before the OSCE. And,
Honestly, I christened those toilets at St George's. Like, with
lovely.
just
Everyone.
Pre-OSCE, everyone now knows that, yeah. Just,
Yeah. Don't go
Love.
to cubicle 3. Yeah.
It's the one that you walk straight in ahead of you.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. I it's funny you said MSK. I'd say that was probably like one of my most nerve-wracking OSCEs because so our MSK one was like a minor illness injuries module, and you had to do 3. I think it was 3 different scenarios on the same morning, or whatever your session was. So like one was like a limb injury, one was a medical complaint, I think like headache or something like that, but then like the history and presenting to the headache will lead you to a different diagnosis depending on which scenario they gave you.
Yeah.
What else we had? We had limb. Oh, and then like another medical one, so like whether it was like you had either cardiac, respiratory, or abdo, and then a neuro exam, and then a limb exam. That was it. Those were the 3.
That's quite a lot.
And it was, and I think you said in like the first episode, in terms of like you need to know a lot more for OSCEs than what you do when you go and do these assessments on the road on patients because you're under those sort of that pressure of exam conditions, and like there are certain boxes you need to tick to pass and certain words and terminology you need to use for your assessments that you might use on the road, but you might not necessarily use that level of terminology because people might not understand it, or it might confuse it, and bits like that.
Talking to the patient, yeah, the patella is here. That'd be quite funny, wouldn't it?
So yeah, I'd say that was probably a nerve-wracking OSCE. I think our most stressful one was probably our third year one. In the third year, so our final OSCE is you just get given a theme. So like our theme was tachypnea, and basically your scenario could literally be anything that any condition that causes tachypnea. But I mean, like, so we had things from like PPH all the way down to just like heat stroke, and then meningitis. Like, so there could be, you could have literally been walking into absolutely anything.
Someone's that's just been on a jog. Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't need to assess you, lovely.
But like, honestly, and so like you would walk in, and so we had like I guess probably most unis have this now for paramedic science, but so we have like 2 mock ambulances like set up. Where, and for this scenario, you were solo responding, backing up a crew as the paramedic, and then you walked onto the back. You got your handover from the lecturer who was acting as the technician, but the technician was acting as the "I'm just a technician, I can't do much for you" sort of role.
Yeah.
They do your obs, and if you told them specifically a thing to do, they would do that thing for you. But that was a very nervous OSCE. Like,
yeah. So like, how did you like mentally prepare yourself before the OSCE? So like the day of the OSCE, I suppose it's nerve wracking as soon as you wake up. Like, today is the day.
I think
there's
so many different factors. So on the day, if you're first in there, you maybe don't have as much time to worry about it. But if you've got like an afternoon slot, you wake up, you have some breakfast. It's like, oh, gotta be at uni for 2. There's a bit more pressure building in the background.
Yeah,
as
definitely.
well. I think just if you don't know it by this point, you're not going to know it when you get in there. So for me, just a little bit of last minute revision, just read through some notes. Don't try and cram anything in last minute, because that is just disastrous.
Yeah, they always say, like, you see on like the GCSE weeks, you see those kids on the tube, like just flicking through their textbooks, don't you?
Yeah.
You're thinking, blimey, mate, you should have been doing that for the last few months, not an hour before your exam.
Yes.
But no, just like a little bit of last minute sort of
just final
touching on stuff. Yeah.
Just can't quite remember that off the top of my head, but let's just refresh that real quick. Just, I think, not playing it cool. That's not what I mean. That sounds like you don't care, but just trying to play it cool. Just, right, it is what it is. I've got to go and do it. Let's get in there. Let's show what I can do, and hopefully at the end we get a good result. Yeah,
because I find that OSCEs, I try to completely separate the OSCEs to the real world in my mind, and what I do is I think of the OSCE like a script, like a play that I'm sort of performing.
Oh, I literally do the same.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I completely separate the fact that this is a patient that might be sitting on the floor or this, and what it does, it takes away, when you go on the road and you're with a patient and you're like, right, I need to think about getting this patient out to the truck because their family's being really sort of, it's disruptive or something like that. In the OSCE, you're not really going to have that. So you know that your patient, wherever they are, is where they're going to stay. You don't have to think about those things. But I think that a lot of people do go into the OSCE and go, oh, are they in the right position? Well, what's my environment like, and things like that, which is all good. You might score a few more points doing that, but do that if you're confident. But for me, I just go, right, this is my OSCE, this is my performance, and this is the script that I'm going to follow.
So I remember, like, in terms of the things you need to remember for the OSCE, that was like my script. Like, so like for like an MSK assessment, for example, those were like my lines, and I remember there was lines. So I used to act, and I sort of used that experience of acting for my OSCE. But the other thing that I did was I just treated it like it was a real patient. So I went in there, and they're an actor, you're acting in a way. And so I just walked in and I just treated them as even though I've just arrived at a job. I didn't treat it as this is like a surreal out of the real world experience. I walked in and I was like, hi, I'm Sam, I'm a blah blah, nice to meet you, what's your name? And I just did it like that. And I don't know if that was like because I'd had that experience of already being on the road and working day to day with patients. I just sort of tried my best to, and I found once I got into that mindset, because like I was nervous right up until the point until they said go, and then I sort of just let the nerves slip away and went into that mode of this is just another patient.
This is just that's it,
And hoped that within that I remembered enough from that sort of script I built in my head to be able to recall all the things that needed to be included in that.
I think prime example there. So my third year OSCE, one of the OSCEs was a full cardiac arrest ALS OSCE, and in my head, build it up in my head like, this patient is really, really critically unwell. They're going to be in cardiac arrest. But then actually, when you get into it, you've got that much to do. You've got to do airways, you've got to do cannulas, you've got to do meds. There's that much to do. That kind of takes the heat off the background stress. It's like 20 minutes later, and it's like, oh, it's done, right? Actually, I didn't worry about it when I was in there because there was that much going on that I needed to do.
Did you ever find like everything you did in an OSCE, the moment you left that room, you were like, oh, what just happened? Like complete memory loss of everything. You're like, did I do everything right? Did I do that? I can't remember if I
That was the biggest enemy.
Did I say hello? Like, legit, did I introduce myself? Did I get consent?
Did I check for danger?
Yeah, like honestly, you just leave, and the moment you leave, gone.
But then we made the error of always, and I don't know why we always did it. We always used to go to the cafe afterwards, grab a coffee, chat with other people. It's like I'd come along and go, oh Sam, how did you get on? What was the deal? Or did you do this? I didn't do that.
Oh yeah,
but Tommy did that. But did you? What was that?
That is the worst thing you do. Whether it's a written exam or practical exam, the worst thing you do is afterwards go and talk about it, and you're like, oh my god, I put A where you put B, and like that is just a downward spiral after that.
And also, I think the ALS OSCE specifically, or even like for those doing OSCEs for their tech course and stuff like that, the ILS one, they're not on the job. If you go to a patient in cardiac arrest, you need to whack the pads on as quick as possible and deliver that shock. I think that's like the main thing to do as quick as possible. But in an OSCE, they're not too worried about how quick you get those pads on and deliver that shock. Obviously, it has to be in a timely manner. But if you go there and you go, right, I'm going to check for danger, and I'm going to do, you've just told me that I'm in a shopping centre, so I've got to think of these things, and then I'm going to do this and check for a pain response, blah, blah, blah. When you inspect the airway, and add loads of points into all of these different things when you're doing the first initial primary survey, it's in your head, you're going, oh my God, I'm delaying putting the pads on, but you're not going to do that in the real life. You're like displaying all of your knowledge to the assessors, which what we got told is kind of the best thing to do. And if it delays you, if you can go, I'm thinking about a C-spine injury here, so what I'm going to do, instead of doing a head tilt chin lift, I'm going to do a jaw thrust to sort of maintain the C-spine or whatever, then you're going to get more points for that, even though you're delaying the thing. So I know loads of people go into that ALS OSCE and they rush the primary survey to try and get the pads on, but actually that's not the thing to do.
I remember doing my peds ILS OSCE in first year.
Yeah.
And like it was just with like a mannequin, like a peds mannequin. And I think it was like the formative, not the summative, so like the one before the big one. And I failed it because I think like in the stress of the moment, I walked in, did like danger response, airway, and when I got to airway, in my nerves, I must have like yanked back that mannequin's head so far, it like just went under itself, and I was just like, so his airway's open, like casually clicking the neck back into place.
It's tricky. It's just been pulled from the
feedback on my thing said, it said hyperextension of airway, critical fail. I was like, yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
they say like sniffing the morning air.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. But and then like, did you get much practice? Did your like uni give you much practice to do the OSCEs?
We got bits. There was like, right, today we are going to do an hours of OSCE practice. But then I think what actually helped was we'd get together maybe away from uni. Or we're at so-and-so halls, we're going to do a bit of practice, come down type thing.
Yeah.
So we didn't necessarily have the kit, you didn't have the mannequins, or you couldn't do necessarily some of the practical skills, airways, cannulas, etc. More kind of the talking aspect, talking out loud for it. And I found that was a big help. So actually just some external practice, away from the university environment, and sort of like giving each other constructive feedback.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you might have missed this, and it's like, damn it, yeah, of course I did.
And it's always the same thing, isn't it? I always forget, I know it's not a big thing, but when you get the IV, and I always forget to then pop the, the lid, there, I pop the cap back onto the top. So, and it's only a little thing, I don't know whether you'd fail for that or not. But
we used to, so at St George's, one of the good things that we did was, for whatever your OSCE was going to be on, your OSCE was going to be on, we used to do like sim sessions once a week, and leading up to the OSCE, so like you would go and do half a morning, half a day, whatever, of sim practice in the sim suite, learning specific sort of skills that you would then piece together and like, oh, okay, this all adds up to now what the OSCE is going to be. So we had plenty of time to practice in uni. But then again, and this probably throws back to like the whole in-service and direct entrance thing, is on station, we were really lucky enough as in-service students to have a team of us that were all in the same cohort. And then we also had all these experienced clinicians that would take us upstairs to skills rooms on station and run through practice scenarios with us. So we were quite well sort of drilled in it.
That's pretty good, yeah. Like even on your station, having like mannequins and stuff to do
Yeah.
stuff on. And then you could even like when you're with a patient, like I know that I go all out sometimes in just properly doing an abdo assessment or whatever, just to keep up my.
Oh yeah,
skills
like
from
on placement, every patient you come to gets a full
like
top to toe.
The patient is an OSCE.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
oh, I only call because of a cough. I understand that, but is your abdomen normally this size? Like,
Do you get abdominal pain when you cough? Yeah. I better assess your abdomen. Then, yeah. Have you brushed your teeth today? It's mad, isn't it? But yeah, like, and it's good practice because then you can in your head just talk about it, or even like talk to your crewmate, like almost like you're teaching them stuff with the patient. Because some patients quite like that, don't they? Like when you talk to them about like all the different things that you're doing to assess them and what this means and what that means, and then it makes you look better at what you're doing to the patient and sort of allows them to trust you a bit more. But you're also reeling off all this stuff that is like reinserting it into your mind. So yeah.
There's the thing with it, just repetition. Tweaking it as you're going along.
yeah,
Repetition.
repetition.
Yeah.
Oh, let's that sounds like a jumping CD.
Yeah. Oh dear. And then that I suppose that the practice then helps with the nerves, doesn't it? Because if you feel unprepared going into that whatsoever, that's just going to make your nerves.
And and that is it. It is just key to, like you said, just practice.
Yeah.
Like the more you do it, the more you get it into your system.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest help and thing you can do with OSCEs, and practice with other people as well.
Mm.
Don't just always practice with the same partner, the same person, because everyone works differently and everyone will have a different approach. So the more people you learn from and learn with, the more like wholesome your approach is going to be.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much to all who tuned in to our first episode. As promised, we said we would run a little competition across on our Instagram accounts. Thank you to everyone that entered and participated. We chose a winner at random using a random number generator, and we can announce that the winner of our Pocket Clinician Student Paramedic Bundle and Bullhorns and Sirens mug is at paramedic.pending. To claim your prize, drop us a message over on our Instagram. And don't worry guys, if you missed out, there will be plenty of other giveaways and competitions throughout later episodes.
So before we move on to the next part of the placement prep and stuff, let's just break down what an OSCE looks like and feels like to someone who might not have done one before, or for the students who have done lots of formative ones or practice ones that haven't actually done a summative one yet. And just so because you can talk about OSCEs, but no one who's done one before knows sort of what the how it actually looks and how it's broken down.
Yeah,
so,
and I think anticipation is a big thing with nerves as well. Like I remember not really fully understanding the OSCE process and being like, God, what should I actually expect? Because they explain it to you to an extent, but you're still like, I don't really know what it's going to be like on the day.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So like on my Cumbria course, I've only done the ALS OSCE, and you go in, you know what it's going to be. It's going to be a cardiac arrest situation. It's probably going to be a shockable rhythm. And they'll give you a card and it says, you'll pick a card. So generally on all these OSCEs you get given like 10 envelopes to pick from. So you'll pick one and they'll all have different scenarios on. And it says, right, you've been called to a 50-year-old male, sudden collapse in the living room, off you go. And they say, right, and so you go into the room, you've got your assessor there, you've got the patient just laid out in the middle of the floor with nice 360 access as they all are. And they say, right, what's your name? So I stated my name. And they said, yeah, it's being recorded so that if there's any discrepancies, they can go back to it. And then as soon as you're ready, just go in and that. And all of the bags are placed down. I know some unis want you to take in the equipment as you walk in, don't they? But my course seemed to be happy with having all the equipment already there.
That's probably a good point just to throw into preparation is know your kit.
Yeah.
Like, always check your kit before you go into an OSCE. And get used to the kit that your university used, because the kit that our university used was different to the kit that we used as a trust on the road. And so, like, because they were, as a university, they're primarily led by their main trust that they serve, not not us. We were like a sort of a secondary trust to them, and so their kit was based on the main trust they serve rather than us.
Yeah.
And so we, as in-service students, we had to completely learn a whole new kit and like their way of doing it. So yeah, familiarise and know your kit is probably key as well.
Good point. Good
Yeah.
point. And then is there anything else that you guys think that sort of with the OSCE, sort of what it actually looks like or feels like that might benefit those?
I think you've touched on it before, and kind of it's not a real patient,
Yeah.
but you have to treat it as one. Sometimes it's a mannequin, sometimes it's an actor. Just go with it. Just imagine that you're going to your grandma or a relative.
Quite importantly as well, and because the patients that are actors are briefed to give. I don't know about you guys, but so for our university, especially in our final OSCE, one of the score points on like the matrix was what was scored by the actor was how they felt their care was.
Okay.
So they took the actor's opinion into consideration for what your final mark would be. Do you think this person treated you well? Did you feel well looked after? That sort of thing. And they will probably feed back to the university afterwards how they felt as the patient. So it's even more so important to make sure that you realise, treat them as a patient.
Oh, fair
Because that's
enough.
what the actors are
Yeah.
looking for.
That's interesting.
That's responsibility for the actor, isn't it? You just think you're going in there with a cut arm and you're like, oh no, my
Yeah, no, I
the
forgot
fate
about
of
that.
this
Yeah,
student lays in my hands.
so in our big OSCE in our third year that I mentioned earlier, like that was a big factor of it, was you had to also treat your patient like a patient because they got to implement on your results of that exam.
That's a good point. And then, if we haven't covered anything or if anyone's got any questions, you can email us and then we'll cover that on the next podcast about OSCEs. But let's move on to placements, because that's a massive... I mean, not for me.
bit.
Not for me, I don't do placements, unfortunately, but so this is going to be led by these two guys here. But yeah, what do you expect? Have you got any tips, or what do people need to?
I mean, we've
know
got
about-
the Pocket Clinician tips that we put up on.
on the Instagram story.
Yeah, so we
that's
put
right,
our top tips for placement. We can run through them. So we've got prepare. Make sure you get a good night's. I misspelt on the post. Make sure you get a good night's sleep. Prep your bag and kit the night before, and then prep any sort of meals and snacks, because it's just less things to worry about when you wake up the next morning or before your night shift, whichever way round you're going in for.
And also, if your mentor's got food, and he goes, "Oh, have you got food?" and then you're like, "Oh no," then you almost feel like you have to.
You're
They're
putting
going
them
out.
out,
Yeah,
or
you're putting them
yeah.
out a bit, isn't it?
Which you
To go and
shouldn't.
get
I mean, you need food, you need food, but.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Know your kit, so don't be afraid to go through kit bags and cupboards. Learn where all the kit is. Ask your mentor or their crewmate to familiarise you with any kit that you're unsure of. I'd say that's a big thing. The last thing you want to be is like on like a big job like in the rest or something, and your mentor shouts, "Oh, go get me the IO," and you're like, "I don't know where the IO is. Like, I don't know what the IO is."
Yeah.
Um,
Or you're looking for intraocular injections and not intraosseous. Yeah.
So it's funny you say about that. So me as a direct entry student, I'd never seen the back of an ambulance before. I think, well, except for once with a relative. But obviously you're not focusing on.
Did you not have any like days in uni where they showed you, here's the back of an ambulance?
Unfortunately not.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I think a lot of unis now have adopted like having a mock vehicle or some older vehicles that have been taken off the road. Because you go into the back of the ambulance, that's your office.
Yeah.
You kind of need to know where everything is. So that's kind of key. Just I know you go to a lot of stations now where stuff is made ready, a lot of stuff is tagged.
Yeah.
Maybe have a chat with the mate ready guys or ask them can we get a vehicle that's maybe not been tagged, so then we can run through kit, what's in this bag,
Or just grab some tags from Make Ready, open them up.
If you're in a
for
Make
mental.
Ready system, I would say even more so, go and chat to the Make Ready people, because no one knows your truck better than the people that make it ready.
I am actually genuinely impressed how you kind of go to the mate ready guys who have no clinical experience, most of them, and go, can I have this? And they're like, oh yeah. And it's like, you go to a random member of the public and you go, can I have a 3-way tap? And they'll be like, do I need to go to screw fix or what? But,
Sorry, my tap's only got one hole.
yeah. So, yeah. I mean, obviously, how did you guys feel sort of first? I know you didn't necessarily do placements. But the first time you saw the back of an ambulance, getting onto the station, what were your thoughts?
Oh my god.
It's daunting, because on my ECA course, I didn't see the back of an ambulance. So you went in there, I had a chat to my manager on my first day to sort of welcome me to the station. And yeah, my first shift, I didn't even know how to literally undo the back door. I tell you what, I was third manning or third personing. No, you're meant to say, isn't it? And our first job was this like person who had like an asthma attack or something. I can't remember the ins and outs of it, but it was quite an ill patient. And they said, right, Tommy, grab the life pack, right? Because I was sitting in the back and the crew was in the front. You grab the life pack, we're going to grab this. Okay, fine. So they then, we get to the job, they come out, they grab all the bits that they need. I didn't know how to take the life pack off of the shelf, because you got to, I mean, in the trust I worked for, and it's pretty much similar in most other places, you have to pull the pin, lift the bracket up, and then do it. But I couldn't work that out. So I was there sort of lifting around and pulling these things out.
Trying
to
break a life pack
what is
free
going
of its
on?
hold.
Yeah. So I went back into the house and I said, sorry, I can't get the life pack off the shelf. And they literally looked at me like, are you serious? You can't do that? Another thing that I struggled with is getting the suction off of the shelf and back onto it as well, because that can be quite finicky, can't it?
Yeah.
And things like setting up a neb. You know, if it's your first placement and they go, oh yeah, here's some salbutamol, here's a neb, can you set that up? I didn't know how to do that. I didn't get taught that on my ECA course, and it seems like a very simple skill to us now, but actually unscrewing the bit, taking that bit off, there's lots of different parts to a nebulizer that if you've never seen one before is quite difficult to work out, isn't it? So just play with those bits of equipment and that as well, I reckon.
So that first placement block for me, it wasn't focused necessarily as much on the clinical stuff. There was an element to it, you know, starting to get your basic assessments going. But a lot of it for the first month was kind of day-to-day life of ambulance work.
Yeah.
You know, the ambulance craft, so to speak. I don't know if different terminology, but like I say, taking a monitor off a bracket, what kit is where, you know, where do you find this equipment in a cupboard, you know, how does meal breaks work, you know, can you stop and get food, can we pick up a drink if you run out or whatever.
Yeah, or even like using the toilet. I remember my crewmate had a student and she looked really uncomfortable. And we had done about 3 non-conveyances in a row, so we didn't really get the chance to use a toilet. And she looked really uncomfortable, like she was in pain. And I thought, oh, is she alright? I said, oh, are you alright? She goes, I'm bursting for a wee, like I don't really know what to do. And I thought, how long have you been bursting for? And she went, oh, on the second patient that we went to, I started needing to go. And I was like, you should have said after, you know. So especially using the toilet, I think us as ambulance staff generally, we feel very obliged to use the toilet when we need to go, and we'll happily sort of call up and go, yeah, we need to use facilities kind of thing, let's go. So yeah, like, don't hold it in, it's awful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, what's we're at number 3, point number 3 we need to do now, is it?
So no question is a silly question, never be afraid to ask questions. No one should make you feel bad for asking questions. Placement is an opportunity for both the learner and the mentor to develop and learn.
There you go.
I've learned a lot from having students out with me in the past.
I have. I think they help keep our practice up to date because they're still learning and pushing new things through, and there's things that we still need to learn as well.
Like a lot of the time, you know, you might go to a job and use a bit of kit. You might use a traction splint for a femur. That's always the common one, traction splint and femurs. And a student will come out and go, oh yeah, work a bit of magic, and it's set up, and it's like, right, we need to put it on. And
My old crewmate, I remember doing an RTC, and we had to traction someone, and it was like dead of night, like lit by a couple of street lamps. There was like a couple of patients, a couple of crews, and me and her like looking at this patient. She's like, oh, we need to traction it. Between the pair of us, we were like, just that moment of silence, and then she goes, oh, give me a minute. She ran back to the truck and she came back with like an A4 laminate that she'd done herself of how to traction the leg.
Yeah.
That was it. We're there like just with this patient that's like, we're like, it's fine, like just walking through this laminate of tractioning your leg.
Well, it's funny you say that about having a laminate, having a prompt. I don't think there's any harm, especially as a student, having some prompts.
There are so many out there, even like paperwork prompts, you know, like with your history of presenting complaint and then you're on it.
You got little pocketbooks, Tommy.
Yeah.
If only somebody would create a pocketbook.
Yeah, so...
You're going to slide in an advert now.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Visit Pocket Clinician.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was going to say, with questions, I've got a funny little anecdote for questions. We were on a night shift and my crewmate student said, why does the end tidal CO2 increase in TBIs? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. She definitely didn't know the answer to that question. So we learnt a bit from that. And so yeah, you know, even like the really funky questions, you're going to learn a bit from that. So yeah, people like questions. Right, point number 4.
Reflect on jobs you attend. A great way to review what went well, what could have gone better, how to improve your future practice, and discuss difficult jobs with your mentor and their crewmate, and always debrief when needed.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to reflect on every job.
No, it's
you'll be there all the time.
I didn't. Yeah, it says reflect on jobs you attend. It's like not like every single job, but jobs that stick out or jobs that have some form of like newness or difficulty to them. Like, oh, I've never come across this before. What's this condition? You know, how do I manage it? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've learned loads myself just from self-reflection. Just going away, you know, there was a little something there that I didn't quite know. That patient was on a medication that I've never heard of. Just get Google out real quick. Oh, right, okay. Enough next time. You know, develop your own ways of practice and etc.
Yeah, I had a crewmate, my most recent crewmate, and he literally wrote every single job that we did that was a bit complex, or they had a certain medical condition that we don't really come across very often. He wrote it down on a bit of paper, and then when he had a bit of spare time, he used to literally write a big reflection on it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but he is probably the most respected paramedic on our station. So I think that comes with doing things like that, like reflecting on jobs.
Fair.
And every job that we went to, especially if we had a bit of time, he'd read about the condition that they had, or he would read through the differentials of our patient, and he was very knowledgeable. Yeah. So
point number 5.
Point number 5. Yeah.
Don't ever feel afraid to challenge others. So everyone is always learning. If you see something you're unsure of or feel is unsafe, challenge it in an appropriate and respectful manner. Any good clinician should receive feedback well. They shouldn't be upset by... And obviously, like I said, give it in a respectful manner. Don't just turn around and tell someone...
Yeah, I really struggle with this one because I hate confrontation, and I think that generally the ego of the ambulance service is very difficult to manage, sort of the staff-wise. And trying to give constructive criticism or even challenging, I find personally really difficult to do, because it's 9 times out of 10, maybe not that many times, but a lot of the time you create animosity between people by going, oh yeah, you know, I would have done that a bit different, or I think that really we should do this. Even when I'm a senior clinician on board, if I've got someone that's doing something and I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound right, I still struggle to say to them, look, let's do this, because of the sort of aggressive feedback you might get from them. Yeah,
I mean, I'd say it's probably hard as well when you're like in service and your crewmates are your friends.
Yeah.
Like, to challenge your friends is probably quite a hard one. But regardless, I think, you know, it's important to feel that you're able to, like, just because you're a student, it doesn't mean your opinion is any less valued or important than that of the crew.
Yeah.
Or you know, any sort of senior clinician on scene. At the end of the day, we're all there to learn, and it might be that you read something in a textbook recently, and it might not be like whether that's right or relevant, but you might be like, oh well, I learned this, you know, do you mind explaining how that relates to blah blah, and you know, stuff like that. And I think it's about picking your moment to do it. So obviously don't do it there and then in front of a patient. If it's going to cause patient harm, obviously maybe do something immediately to stop the patient harm, but you know, by all means, after a job you can always raise it in a way that's like, oh, I noticed you did that, I was taught this, do you mind sort of why did you do it that way? You know, there's nice, respectful ways of doing it, because there might well be that your mentor or their crewmate has developed their own techniques for certain things, and just a simple justification, you're like, oh, actually, yeah, I mean, I really like the way you did that, I just wasn't sure if I could do it, and now I know that I can, I'm going to incorporate that into my practice, and it's bits like that. It's not necessarily negatively challenging, it's challenging to learn.
And, you know, I think, I know I've spoken to you guys about this particular situation before, but I'm going to open it to the floor of the podcast as well. And I went to a job, this is months ago now, and I was with an ECA, so I was the senior clinician. We went to a patient having a STEMI or a heart attack. He didn't recognise the STEMI on the ECG. He told the patient that it was normal, and then I corrected him and said, no, that's a STEMI. He didn't know how to manage it, which is fair enough, you know. And then we got into the back, and we got the patient in the back of the truck, and he was technically attending. But I said to him, look, do you mind if I go into the back so I can manage this patient, because I know what to do. I'm just feel more comfortable sort of managing it. And this guy got quite angry and refused to sit in the back. So I ended up driving us to the cath lab, and that was a really difficult situation that I did to sort of challenge a colleague on what they were doing, and then ask them to sit to drive. It was really difficult to do, and then he refused. He point blank refused. So I ended up driving still. Luckily, no harm came to the patient, and subsequently he doesn't actually work for the trust anymore. But yeah, like, you know, in terms of that situation, how do you manage that? Like with that challenge, that particular, and I know that's on him. It's not on me. You know, I was doing the right thing for the patient, but you know,
I think it's really
behaviour
important
management,
to,
isn't it?
yeah, and I think if you can and you feel safe to, I think always raise it with your colleagues, your mentor, your crewmate first, before taking it like up a level, because it might just be that they're having a sort of a bad day, or they've got stuff going on in their personal lives, and you know, it's easy to say, oh, we shouldn't bring that into work with us, but you know, life is life, and it's what happens.
You still do, don't you?
So I think it's important to raise it with your colleagues first before you take it higher, and then if they're not receiving of that, and you're worried it's going to impact patient care or bits like that, then by all means, I think that's when you sort of take it to another level, like, you know, management wise, or something, or university, like practice education leads, people like that. I mean, discuss your concerns with them.
When I say subsequently he doesn't work for the trust now, it's not because of that situation. He did lots of different other things which I think caused a few ruffles. He ruffled a few feathers. But yeah, so that's that.
Number 6?
Yeah, number 6.
So remember helpful mnemonics and other aids when taking a history, so things like sample, Socrates, OPQRST, and like things for giving handovers like Atmos and SBAR. Feel free to take any pocketbooks or aids with you on shift. All help is good help. We highly recommend, obviously, the Pocket Clinician.
Not biased at all.
Not biased at all.
Yeah.
History taking, documentation and patient assessment pocketbook.
It's got loads of acronyms, isn't it?
It does, yeah. It genuinely has all of them throughout it. And then point number 7, I would say this came up quite recently with me and my crewmate. We're on relief at the moment, and she was working with somebody else, and they had a student out. And I think as a student, you need to always remember the crewmate of the paramedic. You know, your mentor's crewmate will often have more experience than most, and their opinion and input is just as valid and as important. You know, and you should learn from everyone around you.
And so you're specifically talking about the crewmate of your mentor. So
Yes,
that could be an ECA.
Exactly, yeah. You know, and I think when you qualify as well, you're going to be crewed with an ECA or a technician. Most commonly now, it's usually qualified with an ECA, so either a para and an ECA or a tech and an ECA, rather than a para and a tech. And your ECA, you know, level of scope, clinician person, crewmate, is probably going to be the most valuable asset you have, because they're going to be the ones that look after you, keep everything safe for you, and carry you through your role, essentially. Make sure you don't make the mistakes, because their experience is going to be invaluable. You know, they a lot of them probably would have been on the road a long time, and you know, may well be on their own progression routes as well, may well be on like student para courses. So you should never underestimate or undervalue.
I think naturally, as clinicians, you get drawn into the clinical stuff, whereas a lot of the time your ECAs, they're looking at other external factors for treating a patient.
Yeah.
You might spot something in the house that you've completely missed. You know, they might think, this was the thing I always found, I was alright at the clinical stuff, but then trying to get somebody out of the house.
Yeah, your extrication, your detective skills.
And then ironically, you now work for the heart team.
And now with heart, very education, I know what we do. So,
hey James, how are we going to get this patient out of this really tight space?
I don't know, but I'm good at the clinical stuff.
Yeah.
It's key.
If only heart was made up of ECAs, maybe. Yeah, that's like that was the top. I mean, I don't know if we have any more tips on top of that. That was the ones that we like put on.
Yeah,
Instagram,
like because I think they were good to go through, I suppose. But another points that we wanted to touch upon is what makes a good mentor.
So what makes a good mentor? So somebody who is definitely willing to teach. I think that's the biggest thing, is someone who's willing to part their knowledge, their experiences onto a student. But it's got to be in the right way, because I could, you know, talk about my experiences and what I've learned, and it come across quite negatively. I'm not saying I would do that, but obviously there is always there's that risk. You've got to be enthusiastic. You've got to have an open mind, because not every student is the same. I learn differently to you guys.
And people take criticism differently as well,
As
so you
we've
might need
discussed,
to learn about how they might take it.
Adapt your approach to giving feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a mentor that's been in the ambulance world for a little while, knows how it works, is, I want to say, confident in their own abilities, but not egotistical about it.
Yeah. Well, because your style and your technique, that's going to later reflect on that student and how they develop and become a mentor. And so if they have a bad experience, you would hope that actually they're going to do everything they can to make sure all their students have a good experience going forward, and bits like that. I'd say, like James said, it's having that willingness and I think wanting to mentor. There's no good thrusting it upon a clinician that doesn't want or have an interest in teaching or helping others.
No.
Because you're going to get a bad experience out of that.
It's just a shame that I think a lot of trusts now are sort of putting mentor, like, to be a band 6 paramedic, that automatically makes you a mentor.
Yeah, you go on the universities like mentor list for your trust, and
which is a shame, because not everyone wants to mentor, and not everyone is going to be good at mentoring. Just because you're a good paramedic doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good mentor.
No.
And so I think that's a good point. So,
I think being patient is important. You've got to have patience. You can't, you've got to understand that you were a student once, people get things wrong, and you're there to teach and guide. You shouldn't expect your student to have everything right the first time round, and if you're taking on a second year or a third year, you need to understand that they have going to have been taught certain things by their previous mentors before they get to you, and you're going to have to allow and accept that, even if it's different to your own style, and adapt into that. So I think you've got to be very adapting. You probably, obviously communication is key, your communication skills, being able to talk to people, talk to students.
Because touching on your point about different styles, because I feel like a mentor takes their student on and tries to make them like a little mini-me.
Yeah.
And
Mould them
I've
into-
seen that before. And then, if there's a slight attitude issue with certain aspects of the job, then that student ends up with those same attitudes.
They carry the stigmas that their
That's
mentor
it, that their
carries,
mentors do.
absolutely.
And so even as a student, I think it's quite important to be open-minded about the different prejudices and biases that your mentor might hold, because...
Which means, as a mentor, it's probably important to try not to portray too many of your biases and prejudices that you may hold.
Yeah, but that's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, we
So
all have those jobs or those things when they come down the MDT where you sort of roll your eyes, and then if you do that in front of a student...
What kind of things are they for you, Sam?
Definitely not saying that on the podcast.
But no, it's true. So and then we've also touched about challenging, and this leads quite well. So your crewmate, your mentor, so you're a student, right? You're on placement with your mentor, and they go to something that they deem is a load of rubbish. We shouldn't be going to this. This isn't worthy enough for an ambulance. This is the kind of attitude that this mentor has.
Yeah.
And you go to them and go, oh, hello, yeah, I'm gonna do a set of observations. And your mentor says, no, you're not doing observations. We're gonna call this patient's GP, or whatever, I don't know. And they completely dismiss the fact that you need to do a set of observations on this patient. Now, how do you challenge your mentor in that situation in front of the patient? You want to do observations on them. You know that you should do observations on them. How do you challenge your mentor?
I think there's a couple of different ways you can approach that, and there's no one set answer to that. You probably turn around to your mentor and go, oh, well, can I just do some observations just for my own practice? I get that you don't want some observations, but it might make the patient feel a bit better. I get a bit of practice out of it. Do you mind if I do that?
That's quite a good idea, because then you could make it like, oh, it's better for me to do...
Yeah.
I want to practice my manual blood pressure, or...
Yeah.
Yeah, or I've already started now, I've taken the pulse manually, I might as well just carry on finishing the set that I've done. Equally, ask the patient, are you happy for me to do your observations? Back to sort of the basics of consent and things like that. Because if they've heard the first paramedic set, the patient might already be disgruntled at them now and be like, well, just don't even bother, why are you even here?
I think the other approach would maybe be, right, let's go with what your mentor paramedic has said, and then kind of almost switch to an observational role, observe what the paramedic's attitudes are, go through the job, and then at the end have a chat afterwards and go, oh, so just thought, well, why didn't we need to do? Did we not need to do any observations there? I was under the impression that all patients got observations regardless of what was going on.
Yeah, what was your reasoning behind that?
Is there something I missed? Is there something that maybe I need to learn for next time?
Yeah.
You know, in the back of your mind, you might be like, well, I'm maybe not going to do it that way. I will be doing a blood pressure or X, Y, Z on every patient.
But also as a mentor, to receive a challenge like that, hopefully it should make you reflect on your own practice and be like, oh, actually, maybe that was wrong with me. Maybe I should have gone in and approached that job a bit differently. And again, I think that comes back to what makes a good mentor is someone that can receive feedback and receive challenges and not feel like so insecure in themselves that a challenge is a bad thing.
Yeah, no.
You've got to be
true.
secure and confident in your own practice and your own ability to an extent.
Yeah. Does every paramedic go through the PPED program?
In my trust, yeah. So to become a band 6 anyway, like part of that process is to do a PPED course.
Do you guys at your trust do a PPED, James?
So PPED in the terms of going to do a mentorship.
Practice education, yeah, course.
So specifically, no, they don't go to a university, do a recognised mentorship course at the moment.
They do an in-house one?
Done an in-house one.
Yeah, that's what we do, yeah.
But I think the thing now is that universities are putting mentorship modules in their courses.
Right.
So I never did a mentorship module of any description, but I think now it is becoming part of the university courses. One of your modules is on mentorship, which seems a bit weird. It seems a bit, you know, I'm a student, I'm just about to start as a paramedic, but you're already kind of teaching me how to mentor somebody. I personally maybe don't think that's right, but you know, if someone who has done mentorship,
I think it's very early, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
because you're still going to spend your NQP years, your 2 years finding your feet, and probably forget all about that mentoring module by the time it comes to you being a mentor.
I'd be interested to hear if anyone has been to uni and done a mentorship module, what their thoughts and opinions are on it.
Oh yeah, please write in and let us know. That's
yeah, I'd be interested to hear what the thoughts are on that.
Yeah, because it's good. It's like there's so many things that you learn on the degree that's really good, but then there's also so many things that are missed out that you will never know. Like another thing, I mean, this is for a whole nother podcast, but Breaking Bad News. Who learns about that? No one.
Very
That's
limited.
true. Yeah, in university, you're drilled for like
for ROSC.
ROSC, yeah, absolutely. Post ROSC care and all this, but no,
And how many
never,
ROSCs you get?
never roll.
No. Yeah.
You know.
How many people do you have to break bad news to? Pretty much most of the cardiac arrests you'll go to. Yeah, we learn more about ROSC than we do the Breaking Bad News, and it's
Anyway.
But yeah, so I think that's quite a good point of conversation, isn't it? Like all of the challenges that come with placements and the nerves that you get around the OSCEs, and I hope that the people listening to today gets a bit of an insight to placements and OSCEs. And if you've already done your OSCE, you know, hopefully we've given you a few more things to think about. And then in terms of placements, I think you know, hopefully the tips can work, and you can head back onto the Instagram page at Pocket Clinician.
Yeah.
To look through those tips on placement, and then if you've got any questions, please you know, just email us.
And I mean, also, you know, just in summary, make the most out of every placement you go on, whether it be hospital placement or ambulance placement. Get stuck in. Don't be afraid to get involved with anything and everything that you can. Every moment is a learning opportunity.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree. Yeah. So we had quite a. I was impressed with the amount of questions that we got given from the last podcast. So thanks everyone for interacting. Thanks for just listening. To be honest, I didn't realise that
there's at least
would be,
3 listeners out there.
There's at least 3 listeners. So there was about 18,000 questions that we had to go through. No, there wasn't really. There was about 6. But anyway, we're not going to go through that. But so I picked out 3 questions, and I think, James, this one is a good one for you to answer if you're happy to, as the direct entry person, paramedic. So Amy from Bradford, that's near where...
Not a million miles away.
Not a million miles away. She has asked, I have had several offers from different universities. What do I need to think about when choosing which one to go to?
So we touched on this on the first podcast.
We did touch on
I'm
it,
hoping
yeah.
that
Amy, I hope you were listening properly to what James was done, mate. Joking, Amy, go on.
I'm hoping we covered it enough. I think there's just so many things to think about. Obviously, don't be overwhelmed by it, but just having to think about where you want to be. You know, is there somewhere in the country you might fancy seeing yourself living? Some people see themselves living in London. Some people see themselves living on the south coast. You know, some people fancy the northwest and the Lake District. See where you fancy. Get to the universities. You know, get to the open days. Get a feel for the campus or the university itself. Have a chat with the faculty staff. You know, the paramedic faculty staff. Try and chat to students. See what their thoughts are. The students on the course are going to be able to tell you their opinions, their thoughts are, you know, in greater detail than anyone else. And just pick what you think is right for you. You know, sometimes you might think you are taking a bit of a gamble. As we know, gambles pay off sometimes. You know, I got the only offer from Surrey, and I went to Surrey, and it worked out really well.
Well, you met us, didn't you?
Met you guys.
You know, yeah.
So,
Can I jump in on that one as well? I would say a good thing to do is, so each course per uni will have their own modules to build up their programme. So look at the breakdown of modules on the university website and see which modules you think you'd like to learn about, because one university might, for example, have a module on mental health, whereas another one might not. And so it's like what individual modules you'd like to learn about and incorporate into your practice, and where your interests sort of lie. And also, I was going to say, depending on where your placement is, like sort of what James said, you're going to be exposed differently to different sort of incidents and patients and demographics. And so, for example, if you're working in London, your exposure is going to be so much more wide and varied working in a big city versus working in like the countryside and a more sort of rural area.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and we've got a mix of sort of countryside ambulances to sort of inner city ambulance services in between us three, haven't we? So, and we've got lots of different experiences that we share. But I hope, Amy, that answers your question. Very in-depth answer. Well done, boys. Question number 2 we picked out, I thought was quite a good question, from Lewis from Brighton. And to be fair to him, he's 14 years old, so he's got aspirations. So he says, how do I apply to be a technician in the ambulance service? Yeah, so I think, mate, if you're young, you've got your GCSEs ahead of you, so focus on those. You're going to need at least 4 A to C's. I can't remember what numbers that are, but they've changed it. I think that's 9 to 7s or something, but double check it. So you'll need 4 A to C's. And
Is it 5?
Oh, is it 5? Is it? Oh, there you go. Look at that. So look at your GCSEs and look at what you're going to need to do to apply for that.
But definitely need English, Maths and Science.
English, Maths and Science. So focus on your GCSEs. Once you've done that, you know, you can't... to be a technician in the ambulance service or any role in the ambulance service, you have to be 18 anyway. So just wait until you're 18. And then what you need to do is find a trust that you want to work for. So generally, whatever trust, I suppose in Brighton it would be South East Coast Ambulance Service that you'd want to apply for. And go onto their website, go onto their vacancies, or you can go on the NHS Jobs website as well, and then just see when they're applying for them. So they'll be either applying, I think CCAM have emergency care support workers that you can apply for, or they have associate ambulance practitioners, so that'll be a trainee associate ambulance practitioner role. I'm not 100% sure whether you can go straight to AAP there, whether you have to become an emergency care support worker first, but either way I think it's really good to get your foot in the door with the emergency care support worker that they'll offer you around in Brighton. So yeah, you apply for that. In the meantime, Lewis, get some volunteering in. You can join St John Ambulance as a cadet. They're really good. Sam and I were cadets years ago, weren't we?
We were.
It's really good experience. So yeah, join them. And yeah, NHS Jobs when you're 18 and apply for that. Also, get your C1 licence nice and early. So you get your driving licence as soon as you're 17, and then as soon as you're 18, get your C1 licence, and then that will allow you to then progress on to working on the road. Anything else that you want to touch on with that?
No, that's good.
Cool. So, question number 3. I've just qualified. This is from Chris from Dudley. Where's Dudley?
Midlands.
Oh, in the Midlands. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So, Chris from Dudley says, I've just qualified as an AAP in my ambulance service. When is the right time to do private work? So, you do quite a bit of private work, didn't you, Sam?
Not a massive amount, but yeah, I do like event work and stuff. Once you feel confident with your experience, event work and private work is very different to frontline, because you can end up being completely on your own, whether you're doing like things like film sets and that sort of thing, or whether you're just doing like local community events. You could end up being, as an AAP, the lead clinician amongst a smattering of like first aiders, first responders. So I'd say get your confidence levels up, make sure you're really happy with your practice and you're ready to take on that responsibility. Alongside with that, make sure you pick the right company. There's a lot of event companies and private companies out there, so make sure they cover all the things that you need. People that provide you with the correct and appropriate kit, medications. I would always advise ideally working for a CQC registered company, because you know that they have been vetted and approved properly. Not to say that don't work. Some event companies don't have to be CQC registered if they're not transporting patients. So it's hit and miss. Look for reviews, look for feedback. Make sure they've got all the correct insurances that cover you, so liability, indemnity, all bits and bobs like that. You can obviously look at taking out your own insurances as well on top, just to protect you additionally, and maybe putting together your own kit if you choose. But a good company will provide you with all the equipment and drugs and all the insurances, and they'll have a good medical director. They'll have all the relevant policies. They may have PGDs and other such things in place. So yeah, just be careful when going into private practice, and make sure that you are ready for it.
There you go. Make sure you're ready. Cool. So those are the 3 questions. Thanks so much for writing in. We were really sort of humbled by the response that we got. So thanks. Regarding more questions, keep emailing them in, or Instagram messaging us on the @Pocket Clinician or @Bullhorns and Sirens. We're sort of going from both of those.
Or email address pocketclinician@outlook.com.
Yep, there you go. So email those in. Thanks so much. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Next episode, we are talking about the mental health in patients and staff, and trying to break the stigma surrounding that.
Yeah.
So that's going to be quite interesting. Okay. So keep tuned. And yeah, thanks for listening. Cheers, James. Cheers, Sam. Cheers. See you later.
Thanks.